You know, when the 9/11 attacks happened, the most shocking thing wasn't just the attack itself. It was the slow, horrifying realization that the US government actually had all the data it needed to stop it. And out of the ashes of that failure, a company was born. A company so secretive that for a decade, most people didn't even know it existed. This is the story of Palantir.
So, you're probably asking, how is that even possible? Well, think about it. The US had the hijackers' flight school records. They knew about weird, suspicious money transfers. The hijackers' names, they were literally sitting on a watch list. Even their strange travel patterns had been flagged weeks before. They had all the pieces.
The issue wasn't a lack of information, not at all. The problem was that the info was trapped. The CIA's databases couldn't talk to the FBI's, which couldn't talk to the NSA's. It was like every agency had one piece of a giant jigsaw puzzle, but they were all in different rooms. No one could see the whole picture. The 9/11 Commission report just hit the nail on the head, calling it a failure of imagination, not of intelligence.
Now, to really get how they solved this, we actually need to rewind the clock, back 3 years before 9/11 to 1999. Because, believe it or not, a very similar problem, connecting a bunch of scattered dots, was playing out at a tiny startup called PayPal, co-founded by Peter Thiel. PayPal was a game-changing idea, sure, but it was bleeding cash. And I mean bleeding. $10 million every single month. All of it was being siphoned off by this incredibly sophisticated ring of Russian fraudsters thousands of miles away.
So PayPal's engineers did what engineers do. They built an automated system to fight back. They started writing rules, block Russian IPs, flag transactions over $500. But for every single rule they wrote, the hackers just adapted. It was this endless game of cat and mouse. And frankly, the automated system was getting its butt kicked. This wasn't a math problem anymore. It was an intelligence problem.
And this led them to a huge insight, the idea that would become the very DNA of Palantir. A computer just sees rules. It sees individual data points. But a human analyst, when a human looks at that same data, they don't just see data. They see a story. They see connections. They get that gut feeling when something just feels off.
So, instead of trying to replace the human, they decided to build software to make them superhuman. They built a tool called Igor, and the idea was this simple, powerful loop. The machine does the heavy lifting, flagging anything suspicious. The human looks at the story and makes a decision. And then, this is the key, the system learns from that decision. This simple idea cut fraud by a massive 70%.
Okay, so let's flash forward to after 9/11. Peter Thiel's watching the news, and it hits him like a ton of bricks. The United States' intelligence failure was the exact same problem he had just solved at PayPal. The government had all the data points, they just had no way to connect them into one coherent story. So he decided he was going to build America's version of Igor.
So he takes this idea to every venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. His pitch was simple. We're going to stop terrorists and we're going to sell to the US government. And every single one of them said no. They laughed him out of the room. Government tech is boring, the CIA is a terrible client, your idea is going to fail. So Thiel put $30 million of his own money on the line and started Palantir himself in 2003.
Now, this next part was a brilliant strategic move. Palantir had no product and zero credibility. So Thiel didn't go after the biggest check. He went after the most powerful logo. He managed to get a small $2 million investment from a firm called In-Q-Tel, which just happens to be the CIA's own venture capital firm. And just like that, with that one little investment, Palantir was basically CIA certified. Suddenly, every other three-letter agency in Washington was willing to take his call.
So in 2005, Palantir gets its first real shot, a demo for actual CIA analysts. And it was a complete and total disaster. A train wreck. Why? Because they had built a product for a problem they imagined the analysts had, not the one they actually faced day to day. But that failure led them to invent something totally new, a role that didn't exist in Silicon Valley, the forward deployed engineer. The idea was radical. They took their best software engineers and literally embedded them inside the CIA. They ate with the analysts, they watched over their shoulders, they were writing code right there beside them.
So here's how it worked. An analyst would say, hey, this button is totally useless, I need it to do X, and the Palantir engineer sitting next to them would literally code that exact feature overnight. The next morning, it was ready for the analyst to test. This feedback loop went on for 3 straight years. Think about that. The CIA wasn't just using Palantir software, they were building it with them.
All right, so by 2008, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan are raging, and Palantir's technology, now forged in the fires of the CIA, was about to be deployed to the front lines.
Out in the war zone, the single biggest killer of American soldiers wasn't what you'd think. It wasn't bullets, it was the IED, the simple roadside bomb. These hidden traps killed over 2,600 American soldiers and wounded tens of thousands more. The Pentagon was desperate, so they called Palantir.
And Palantir did what they did best. They sent their forward-deployed engineers right into the war zone. They listened to soldiers, and they started feeding battlefield data into their software, which they now called Gotham. And Gotham started seeing things no human possibly could. Patterns like IEDs on this road almost always explode on Tuesdays between 2 and 4 p.m., or finding connections between specific phone numbers that were always active right before a blast. This wasn't just data analysis. This was helping troops find bombs before they could kill.
And that, of course, brings us to the most legendary, though officially unconfirmed, chapter in the whole Palantir saga. For a decade, Osama bin Laden was a ghost. Then, in 2011, he was found. How? Well, according to numerous intelligence sources, the secret weapon that cracked the case was Palantir's Gotham.
The CIA supposedly had one tiny clue, a nickname for bin Laden's most trusted courier. They threw every single scrap of data they had, millions of documents, satellite images, phone recordings, all of it, into Gotham. Now get this, before Gotham, tracing a single money trail through Al-Qaeda's network would take an analyst 72 hours. With Gotham, it took 12 minutes. The software connected the dots, it found the courier, tracked him to a compound in Pakistan, and we all know how that story ends.
After the bin Laden raid, Palantir just exploded. The FBI, the NSA, the Marines, everybody wanted their software. But the real magic isn't just what they built, it's how they built it. And there are 3 really powerful lessons inside the Palantir playbook that honestly, anyone can use.
First lesson, make humans superhuman. Palantir learned this way back at PayPal. The point isn't to build software that replaces people. The goal is to build tools that augment their natural intelligence and intuition. You combine the raw number-crunching power of a machine with the amazing storytelling ability of a person.
Lesson number 2. Get inside your customer's head. Remember that first disastrous demo? It failed because they were building in a vacuum. Their entire company turned around the second they closed the distance between the engineer and the end user. It just proves that the most valuable seat in the world isn't in your office. It's right next to your customer.
And finally, lesson 3. The best branding is the best client. Peter Thiel didn't chase the biggest paycheck, he chased the one logo, the CIA, that gave him instant, undeniable credibility. That one client opened every other door for him. It's a great reminder that one legendary client is worth more than 100 average ones.
So, that's the story of how a PayPal fraud problem became the CIA's secret weapon. And it kind of leaves us with a powerful question to think about in our own lives and our own work. What problem could you solve, not by trying to replace people, but by finding a way to make them superhuman?
If you found this explainer valuable, please do me a favor and share it with your friends. And for more deep dives like this, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.